Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 4 of 80 days to your dream body. Your protein source for today is going to be bison burgers. It is a shoulders and arms day, and the theme for today's video is movement assessment. So right now, I'm going to be sharing some movement assessments. And while we're resting, let's move on to the theme of today's video, which is going to be assessments. And the first thing that I'm going to teach you guys how to assess is hip mobility using the active straight leg raise. With the active straight leg raise, you are going to perform this in a supine position. And if you are performing this on a client or patient, you want to be standing to the side of them. What you would do though is have them lay down on their back, and then you want them to, with a completely straight leg, so the knees on both sides should be straight and both toes should be pointing straight up toward the sky. You just want to see how far can they go into hip flexion without using any compensatory patterns, and then come back down. What exactly are we looking for when we perform this? Well, first thing that we want to do is take a look at the lateral malleolus of the ankle and see how high does it get. So using something like a dowel rod, you could stand right next to them, and then whenever they reach their maximum limit, you would just line up the dowel rod with the lateral malleolus of the ankle and see where on the opposite femur does the ankle line up. Ideally, they should be able to cross mid-femur. If they are unable to cross mid-femur, then you want to see, is it at least somewhere between the patella and the femur? If it's not between the patella and the femur, you definitely want to work on hip mobility. If it is above the mid femur, then at that point, pretty much all of their hip hinging motions are going to be good to go. Between the mid femur and the patella, you're going to want to proceed with caution, and you're going to want to work on form a lot. And below the patella, you would want to avoid things like hip hinging patterns until you work on their mobility. Then the other thing is with the toes, you don't want to see any compensation. So if they start going up, if they start turning out, or even out on the bottom leg, the leg that's not working, that's going to be a compensatory pattern, and you would stop as soon as you see any deviation. But that's it. Time for set number 3. And now that we've assessed the patient's hip, it's time to move down to the ankle. For the ankle mobility test, what you would want to do is same with the active straight leg raise. You're standing to the side of the patient. You would want them to get the working foot, and then with the non-working foot, you would place the heels in line with the toes of the working foot. From this position right over here, you want them to drive the knee as far forward as possible. And what you would want to do is, standing from the side, see, are they able to clear the medial malleolus of the non-working limb? If they're not able to clear the medial malleolus, then they have some ankle restrictions, and you would want to do either some soft tissue treatment, mobilization work, myofascial stretching, something to improve their ankle mobility. Then the next thing that you would want to do, oh, and for this one, actually, one more thing, is you want to make sure that they're not cheating by raising the heel up off the ground. So when they are performing the test, the heel of the working leg should remain in contact with the floor. You don't want it to come up. If it comes up, as soon as it comes up, you stop the test, and wherever the knee was at the point where it elevated, that was their end range. Next, we want to take a look at the shoulder mobility. With regard to shoulder mobility, you're going to have the patient put their thumb inside of a closed fist, and you want to be behind them. In one shot, without wiggling, you want to instruct them to go one hand over, one hand under, and try and get their hands as close to one another as possible without wiggling or straining. This one right over here, ideally they should be within one hand length. If they are within one hand length, they are good to go. You could perform any type of vertical or horizontal pressing. If they are within 1.5 hand lengths, then you would want to work a little bit on mobility, and you would want to be cautious with overhead pressing and focus a little bit more on horizontal pressing. And if they are not within 1.5 hand lengths, if it's even greater than that, then ideally you would want to avoid pressing motions until you work on their shoulder mobility, because it's going to come with a greater risk of injury. But that's it. Time for set number 4. And once we've assessed the slave joints, next we're going to move on to the core. The first core mobility assessment is going to be the Mackenzie press up, and for it, you're going to be in a prone position, meaning you're going to be laying down on your stomach. And you want to imagine that you are getting ready to do a push-up. So your hands are going to be directly below your shoulders. And what you would have the patient do is just press up, and you want to see how much mobility do they have in their lumbar spine. With this one, if it recreates any type of pain in their lumbar spine, this also acts as an impingement test. And if they do have any type of pain, you would want to treat it. If you're not qualified to treat it, then you would just refer them out. But that is the mobility assessment for the lumbar spine. Moving up to the thoracic spine, we are going to do the thoracic arm raise test. A couple ways that you could do this. If you have the tools that I showed you yesterday, you could use the inclinometer and have them go up. You would place one inclinometer at the C7T1, one at the L5, at the T12L1, and you would want to see if they could reverse the curve. If you don't have that equipment available, then what you could do is just have them go against the wall. You would have them place 1 foot length away from the wall, and then while maintaining their butt, their back, and their head, touching the wall, you would want just them to go flex their arms and see, are they able to get their thumbs to touch the wall using straight arms? If they are able to do that, they have good thoracic mobility. And then we already did the impingement clearing test as part of the lumbar spine assessment with the McKenzie press. We could also do an impingement clearing test with the shoulder. You just have them reach across, up to the sky, down. If there's no pain whatsoever, they're good. If they end up going and they bring their elbow up to the sky and they have some pain in their shoulder, then there's some type of joint pathology in the glenohumeral joint, and you would want to either treat it or refer out if you're not qualified. But time's up. Fifth and final set. And while we're resting, let's get back to the theme of today's video, which is movement assessments. With regard to the assessments, now that we've assessed mobility, next it's time to assess stability. And one exercise that we can do is the rotary stability test. The rotary stability test is going to assess trunk and pelvic stability. And the way that you would do it is you would get a patient or client into a quadruped position, and you want some type of gap in between the arms and knees. For me, I usually end up using this white line right over here. But the way that it would be performed is you would have the client or patient get into quadruped. You want the hips stacked directly above the knees, and you want the shoulders directly above the wrists. Then from this position right over here, what you would want them to do is you would just have them extend out, touch the elbow to the knee, extend back out, and then come back to the starting position. That would be considered great core and pelvic stability. If they are unable to do that, the next step, we would do a cross pattern. So we would do opposite arm, opposite leg. So same thing, you would have a little bit of a gap, about 6 inches between the hands and the legs. And then for this one right over here, what they would do is opposite arm, opposite leg. They would reach out, touch the elbow to the knee, reach back out, and come back. If they are unable to do that, then you really want to focus on core strengthening and core stability as well as pelvic floor exercises. With regard to athletes that have a lot of rotation in their sports, like hockey players, baseball players, boxers, anything that involves twisting, golf, rotational stability is going to be very, very important. So you would want to work on that if you train with any athletes that do a lot of rotation. But time is up. Set number 3. And while we're resting, let's get into some more assessments. Now that we've assessed rotary stability, next we're going to assess trunk stability. And we're going to do that by doing the trunk stability push-up. For the trunk stability push-up, we're not going to do it the same way you would do your traditional push-up. Your hands are going to be a little bit more elevated. That way we can see exactly how strong is the trunk. And ideally, I like to perform this with a dowel rod. What you would do is have a client in prone position, get them into that push-up position, and the webbing of their hand right over there, what you would want to do is line that up with the acromion. And then for men and women, this is performed differently. For men, you want the thumbs aligned with the forehead. So you would just go ahead, get into your push-up position, take the dowel rod, you would place it on the back, and with the dowel rod, you want to see if they are able to do the trunk stability push-up without losing the curvature in the spine. So you would just have them go at the level of the acromion, at the level of the forehead, and then see, can they come up and back down? For women, they would perform this at the chin level. And same thing, you would just want to see, are they able to come up, come back down, while maintaining that neutral position. That would be considered great core strength and core stability. For men and women, if they are unable to perform that, then you would move it. So for men, from the forehead, if they cannot perform it there, you would move down to the chin. And for women, if they could not perform it at the chin, you would move down to the clavicle. And that is the trunk stability push-up. If they are unable to do it, so if a man is unable to do it at the chin, woman is unable to do it at the clavicle, they have very poor core stability and they have poor trunk stability. So you would really want to focus on improving their core strength. But time's up. Set number 5. And while we're resting, we are going to assess the lunge pattern by performing the inline lunge. The inline lunge is a terrific assessment for assessing mobility, stability, balance, and coordination in the ankle, knee, and hip. And the way that it is performed is you would want to perform a lunge pattern in a straight line. So I'm going to use this line right over here, and then I'm going to perform it from the side so you can see exactly what I'm doing. But what you would do is stand on the line. You would want the knee in line with the heel of the front leg. And then with the dowel rod, what you would want to do is you're going to take the dowel rod, place it behind the back. Whatever leg is forward, that arm goes underneath the lumbar spine. Whatever leg is backward, that leg is going to go behind the cervical spine. And then you just want to see, are they able to come up, come all the way back down so that the knee touches without allowing the head, the back, or the butt to come out of contact, or without losing that vertical positioning. Now from the side, so you guys can see it a little bit better. So we have the knee directly behind the heel. We have the left arm, or the front leg. That arm is going to be under the lumbar spine. The back leg, that arm is up under the cervical spine. Stand up, come back down. You want the dowel rod to be in a vertical position, and you don't want anything leaving. So when they are performing this exercise, you want to see that the dowel rod is not moving side to side. They're not letting their head come off. They're not letting their butt come off. If they have really, really good ankle, knee, and hip mobility, stability, coordination, and balance, they should be able to do this no problem. If they can't, you need to work on those areas. But time's up. Fifth and final set. And while we're resting, I'm going to be taking you through one final stability assessment, and it is going to be the hurdle step. The hurdle step is terrific for determining any type of either restrictions, mobility issues, or lack of stability, strength, and balance in the ankle, knee, and hip. The way that you would set it up is you would get a hurdle, and you want to set the hurdle at the height of the tibial tuberosity. You want to get a dowel rod. You're going to have a patient or client drape it over their back, and you want the dowel rod to remain parallel to the hurdle. And also, when they are doing the step, you want the toes in line with the hurdle. From this position, you would instruct the patient or client to step over the hurdle without touching it, keeping the hip, knee, and ankle in one straight line. They're going to tap their heel to the ground and then step back over. And ideally, when they are performing the hurdle step, what you should see is that the dowel rod is going to remain parallel to the hurdle, and the ankle, knee, and hip remain in one straight line. So you shouldn't see any type of rotation or compensation patterns to be able to clear the hurdle. You don't want to see any type of balance issues, and they shouldn't actually touch the hurdle. If they touch the hurdle, if they lose their balance, or if the hip is out of alignment, that means that they did not pass the test. So you would want to see that they could step right over it, tap the heel to the ground, and then come right back, keeping everything in one straight line. This is going to be a great indicator for any athletes that involve a lot of single leg stability. Any athletes that require a lot of single leg stability and balance, you would definitely want to make sure that you are incorporating some proprioception exercises and some corrective exercises for the knee, ankle, and hip if they fail this test. But that's it. On to set number 3. And while we're resting, I'm going to teach you how to assess the squat pattern using the overhead squat assessment. We're going to need a dowel rod, and we're going to start from the ground up. The heels, you want the medial malleolus in line with the acromion. From there, you want the toes pointing straight ahead. You're going to take a dowel rod, place it on the recliner patient's head, have them place it so that their elbows are at 90 degrees. Once at 90, they are going to press up overhead, and you are going to instruct them to squat as low as they can while maintaining the dowel rod overhead and their thoracic spine parallel or higher to their shins. And you're just going to observe and see exactly what happens. I'm just going to show you guys from the side so you can see exactly what's going on. But just press overhead. Go down as low as you can, come up. If they end up hinging forward at the hips, or if they are not able to get below parallel, or if they just have excessive rounding, those would all be considered faults. And then what you would do in that case is you would perform the same assessment on an elevated platform. So I like to use the slant board, and you want about a 2-inch elevation. So you would do the exact same thing. You have the heels so that the medial malleolus is in line with the acromion, dowel rod, 90 degrees at the elbow, press up, and then you would perform it and have them do the same thing and see if they are able to improve their squat. If they are able to perform it without the assistance, then you know that their squat pattern is good to go, and you're pretty much free to do whatever type of squat pattern you would like. If they need the assistance, then you would want to modify to the traditional squat, and doing something like a heel elevated squat would be better for that particular patient or client. And if they can't do it even with the slant board, then they definitely need to work on their ankle, knee, and hip mobility, and you would need to do some further assessments. But that is the overhead squat assessment. Time for set number 4. And the final assessment I'm going to be demonstrating for you is the Klatt test. This is one that I use quite often with my athletes. The purpose of the test is to assess an athlete's ability to transition between positions and also see how their body reacts to ground reaction forces. For it, we're going to need an aerobic stepper and some risers, and you need enough risers that it will reach their mid-tibia. You're going to ask the client, patient, or athlete to place their foot on the platform. With the non-working leg, you're going to have them go into hip flexion so they don't hit the ground. You're then going to ask them to clasp their hands in front of them, and you are going to instruct them to step off of the platform and stick the landing. Ideally, they should be able to stick it. What you're going to see is if they end up stepping off and they go into a valgus knee, that could indicate weakness in the vastus medialis. If they end up going into a medial hop or pronation of the foot, that could indicate weakness of the adductors. If they end up going into hip flexion, that could indicate weakness in the gluteus maximus. If they have an anterior hop, that could indicate weakness in the hamstrings. If they have an anteromedial hop, meaning they end up going on a diagonal, that could indicate weakness in the semimembranosus and adductors. And if they have a lateral hop or they go into excessive supination, that could indicate weakness in the gluteus medius. For this assessment, what you would want to do is start with just the platform by itself and go up one riser at a time. If you notice that they exhibit one fault, the test isn't over yet. You want to keep performing the test until you see 2 faults. Once you've noticed 2 faults, you can stop. And if they make it all the way to mid-tibia without exhibiting any faults, they pass the test and you're good to go. But that's pretty much it. Time for the 5th and final set. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high-quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.